This is Com Truise.
This is Makeup a Vanity Set, and you're listening to the Paradise Arcade.
The Paradise Arcade may contain explicit content. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to the Paradise Arcade with Eric and Kyle.
Okay, so we're all here. Thanks, both of you, for joining. It's really awesome.
Oh, now we got video.
Oh, hey
Yeah,
there.
I keep the thing covered for the spies out there.
Oh yeah. Well, luckily there's no one going to be creeping on the feed, so it's just us. There's going to be no intruders.
Cool.
Might be this dog, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, your dog. Yeah.
If y'all don't have pants on, it's okay.
Just no one stand up. Zoom call etiquette is also like a weird. It's like everyone just dove in head first and no one really gave any thought to it. So everybody's in different orbits on that, like how to communicate, how not to talk over one another. Like, I think that just adds a layer of like discomfort to sitting on Zoom calls, like. And I think it makes it that much worse, especially like on a business end. Like if you're dealing with like a production or something and you're talking to all these, and there's like 15 faces and they're all looking at you and you're just like, I hate this. I hate every aspect of it. It's like,
I think it's more awkward than actually having meetings in person.
It absolutely is.
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah. It's weird. I mean, we're all there. We're all people, but there's something that's also like really just the whole like uncanny valley. Like you're seeing all these faces on a screen and everybody like, and I think everybody else, I don't think anybody wants to be there. You know what I mean? Like I think
no,
everybody's just sort of in the same boat where they're all like, well, we're here. Fuck it. We're just doing the thing. Yeah. I feel like no one's going to admit it, but you're sitting there staring at your own face. You're just like, that's weird. I'm a weirdo.
That and I feel like I could be doing something more productive.
Exactly.
Just I've been actively trying to just stay off my phone as much as possible. I can't. I mean, just the news today and stuff like that. It's just chaos. Yeah. Like 24/7. You can't escape it unless you physically really force yourself to not use it.
Yeah, you have to put it down. I'm trying to declutter the stuff that's on the phone. You know how the phone makes everything convenient?
Flip phone.
Yeah.
But I'm wearing a watch again because it's just one way that I don't check my phone. It's one of those stupid habits that you have.
Yeah.
'Cause they're evil.
Well, and I think that's another weird byproduct of COVID. It's like we were sort of sucked into that digital vortex, whether we like it or not, which isn't in and of itself is like a very dystopian thing. It's like we're all connected 24/7. And there's nothing we can do about it. It's like we have to, I hate all social media. Like I wish I could leave it all behind and just do, like the Bill Murray route and just have a phone here. And if it rings, and if I'm here, I'll answer it. And if I'm not, I won't. That kind of thing. But in this day and age, especially if you're any kind of creator of any kind of content, you have to have all that shit. And there's no way to get away from it. And it's like.
I've been thinking of using someone through the label to do it because I don't want to really respond to anything anymore. I just want to write the music and just have my normal life outside of it. I don't know. I mean, I don't feel comfortable engaging with people or making content just to I don't know, stay relevant or on everybody's radar. I just feel like that's so far from why I think I ever got into this. I can't. I don't know, and it causes me so much anxiety these days. I don't know.
Hey, thanks for doing this today.
We know too much stuff, and then there's people who are oversharing, and I don't know.
There's a component of it too, especially if you're somebody who's publicly known, right? Where they are like, oh, I own all your records, and I know you, and then you're like, no, you don't. Yeah. And so there's a strangeness, you have a lot of strange interactions through that.
Oh yeah.
But then on the also with that, it's like you just don't have like especially people who work in music, especially electronic music. It's like you're a person who feels very comfortable interfacing with machines all day long. And so like that's your workflow. That's how you are. And I was listening to a podcast recently where this guy had written a series of essays about spending time alone, like learning. It's like a famous Tarkovsky quote. Like he always said, people need to learn how to be alone. It's absolutely true. And it's not something we do now as a people. Like we're so dependent upon, the dopamine of like, I gotta see if I got some likes, or I gotta do this, or I gotta do this. And I think like, it made me think about how I work and how, I sit in a room full of machines and I interface with machines, and like, that's my comfort. Like I feel more comfortable here than I do anywhere. And so the idea that like, it's expected of us to go online and post things and do reels and get engagement, it's like nauseating, because you're just like, that's not who I am. That's not how I don't want to talk to people. I always think of that scene in that scene in what is it? I can't think of the name of the movie. Daniel Plainview, the There Will Be Blood, when they're sitting at the beach and he's like, I can't keep doing this with all of these people, and he has such disdain for the rest of humanity because they're in his way. He's like a driven guy. He's like, this is what I do. I'm doing my thing.
My parents have a camp in the mountains of upstate New York, and cell phone service is still not really. You have to drive a little way, and you might get like a little spot near the lake where you can make a call, but forget about like checking email or anything. And I'm always super excited when I go, because I'm like, no, if I'm this thing, I'm only gonna use my phone for playing music, and that's it. Like playing tunes outside by the while we're grilling or whatever. And then towards the end of every trip, I start to get really stressed out about going home, and like, that drive home, you probably make it, it's only an hour from where I grew up, my house. But like you get cell phone service back about 45 minutes into that trip. And then, everybody except for the person who's driving is glued to their phone, like getting all caught up. And that stresses me out. I'm like, I have so much crap to respond to and all this stuff. And I don't know. I feel like back to like the content creation thing, like, I mean, can I just create the musical content? You know what I mean? Like we have to devote all this time to like, I don't know. It seems.
Do you suffer from? So on that note, like, do you suffer from like decision fatigue? Because I think about that too a lot. Like I'm one of those people. Like if I go to like I love to eat food. And like if I go eat somewhere and I'm like, okay, this is what I like. This is what I'm gonna get. Like I'm not the person who's gonna look at the menu and get something different every time. Like I'm a dude that gets up in the morning and puts on a black t-shirt and like makes music. And I'm like, all of my energy is devoted to making music, and that's where the decision stuff comes in. But everything else, I'm like, let's just keep it simple. Like I don't want to overthink it.
Yeah.
I'm the same exact way.
Yeah. And I think like the onslaught of information that we get from our phones and from social media is like an active deterrent, to your sort of mental capacity. It's like where the things that you're trying to actually invest time in are, completely run over by, having to know every single thing about whatever. And it's sometimes just as innocuous as like somebody posting pictures of like, I ate this for lunch, or it's like every single insight into every think piece about everything that's happening ever.
Yes.
It's too much,
It's extremely overloading. I'm the same, the black t-shirt, black shorts. I walk the dog at the same time every day. The neighbors must think I'm a bum because I'm dressed in the exact same outfit every day. Like I only put on like fancier shoes if I go out to dinner, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I try to cut down on any sort of, I like to cook a lot. That's what I was doing right before. I was making some ramen stuff for tomorrow, but that's where I do a lot of my decision making, is like, what I want to cook and things like that. And definitely obviously with the music, but everything else I'm trying to like cut way back on really having to think too hard on that kind of stuff. Well, it does. It undercuts the process. Cause I think so much of trying to like a lot of times I'll get emails from kids and they're like, hey, how do I get into making electronic music? And it's like, well,
I think for a lot of people, they get on YouTube and they see a video and they're like, I could do that. Or they hear something and they go, I could do that. And the thing is, like, they're not thinking about all the time that person has put into, you know, before you even release anything. You know, most people have spent their lifetime, you know, trying to hone a craft and figure out their voice. And yeah. And I think that, like, you know, there is a definite, like, and that comes back to that whole, like, immediacy, like everything right now, got to have it right now. And I think so much that's going on in the world today. It's like, if we just slow the fuck down and relax, you know, like, and let the thing sort of gestate a little bit before we jump off a cliff, you know, like, maybe we'd be better for it, you know?
Yeah, everything is, it just feels so rushed lately. I don't know. I'm very much the, you know, especially with writing music, I'm going to take my sweet time, and I'm not going to, if I don't feel it, I don't feel it. You know, like, I haven't really I worked on one thing this week, and I really haven't. I mean, I just not really inspired right now. It's pretty grim out there, but, you know, I should turn it into inspiration. But I think always for me, it's been, you know, trying to write about current events or what's happening in my life or outside my life. It takes me a long time to digest it and then figure out what it really meant to me. And I might write about it, you know, years down the road or something, not in the immediate ever. I can't really translate that well, that you know, that quickly. Anyway.
No, totally. I mean, you and I have talked a little bit just through Instagram about, ironically through Instagram, about dystopia, you know, and, like, I think a lot about how, you know, as a kid, you know, your childhood sort of relationship to dystopian ideas, right? So, like, as a kid, you might read Animal Farm, or you might read 1984, or you've seen, you know, I was born in 82, so it's like, you know, seeing the science fiction films that came out during the 80s, which are very much a response to the shittiness of the 80s. You know, like, I know we do a lot of romanticizing, but the 80s were not, like, a great time. It's like you had a lot of political strife, stock market stuff, AIDS crisis, you know, have all these things. And I think a lot of the great sort of art that comes out of the 80s came about because of people's desire to just escape, right? To, like, sort of dive into fantasy rather than sort of look at reality. And I look at where we're at now, and I'm like, there's so much chaos in the world, and I keep looking to see, like, okay, so where's the great art going to come in? Like, where are we going to find, you know, where are the great movies going to come out that are, like, really challenging how we're thinking, you know, aside from just endless superhero movies or whatever. Like, but I'm always looking at it, and I'm kind of curious, like, you know, because you're a guy who makes music that is very much, like, in line with that. You have spoken a lot about the conceptual end of it, and how a lot of your music, if not all of your music, has to rely on a concept or an idea behind each track or behind each record. So, like, how do you parse through now this reality, and especially as an adult too, because that's another big part of it too, like our perception of it as an adult versus as a kid. You know, how does that figure in? How does that fantasy and reality figure into what you do?
It's very difficult. I feel like when I first really started this project, obviously the world was a very different place. I feel a bit smothered now. I mean, not only with just everything happening in the world, with the way the music industry has completely drastically shifted to, you know, everything is just all over the place. And, you know, back to what you said about when people ask you, like, you know, how did you start writing music like this or whatever? It's like, you know, I don't know. I was just making stuff, and I found something that I really latched onto, I guess. And it's a very difficult question to ever answer, because everybody's story's completely different, you know?
Yeah.
But I think, you know, now it's been this whole pandemic right into today I've been pretty slow on the output. I mean, I've had some projects that, I did the film score and some commercial stuff, and, which has been a nice little break because that was somebody else's idea that I had to kind of wrap my ideas around. So it wasn't as difficult as me, conceptualizing, completely on my own. But I'm getting back to that point where, I'm going away for a week, the week after next, and I think I'm really going to sit down when I get back and bang the record out and just see what comes of it. But I feel like any time up until right now, I feel like when I've sat down to write, it's felt very forced, or like I'm forcing myself. Which sometimes I do have to do that, and I do like deadlines. I think they. Yeah. Let alone, having a concept in my mind and a kind of, at least a general flow of things on top of having a deadline. Really, I work better under pressure. That's for sure. So, I don't know. Well, I think, but there's a lot of pressure right now from shit that's got nothing to do with music. And I'm just like, I feel nauseous all the time. Just, it's crazy out there.
So how did? So you just did it's your first film score, right?
Yep.
How did that happen? How was that experience for you?
Alan Palomo, Neon Indian, he hit me up last year and was like, "Hey, my buddy's got this film, and we're looking for someone to score it. I'm unfortunately a bit too busy to take it on." And he was like, "Would you be interested?" I'm like, "Totally," And then I talked to the director and just kind of went for it.
Do you feel like that was sort of a natural transition for you to get into sort of post-production end of things, or was it, I don't know, how was your experience doing that?
It was pretty smooth, honestly. It took me a little while to wrap my head around some of the, some things, just to, I think, scoring a film, I'm probably not going to use the right terminology, but I think writing music that way was very different for me because I wasn't necessarily focused on a BPM ever. You know what I mean? I was very much just kind of focused on the way that the film was, because it was pretty close to the cut that was released when I started working with it. And then, just breaking it up into sections and kind of, I went through it a few times and I was like, all right, cue here, cue here, cue here, and then I kind of just worked that way through it. It took a while. I was working on it for quite a few months, just really trying to develop, some sounds or kind of just the overall texture. But, they had put spec music in there. So I was, I had something pretty concrete to go off, Mm-hmm. It was a heck of a job, but I'm excited to do things like that more than, I think my touring days are pretty numbered.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like with transitioning into like doing more post-production work, right? Yeah. It's interesting because you're suddenly going from, I'm the dictator of this whole situation. I just make the decisions and I do all this stuff. Suddenly you're sort of having to process someone else's art through your lens.
Yeah.
But then you have to circle back around and talk to them and then listen to them be like, well, I don't really like that, which happens.
Yeah.
And so then you get to learn real fast, how fragile your ego is in that situation, which I think is a good learning experience, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. I think my many years in advertising really forced me to be okay with that.
Yeah.
I definitely, at first I was like, when they weren't stoked on some of the cues, I was like, but I quickly got over it because I'm like, well, this is the client and they're paying me to do exactly what they want. You know what I mean? With I'll put my little flair in there however I can, but
I think it's,
I enjoyed the structure, honestly,
I think it's interesting that you came from advertising into music. It's funny because I have all the friends that I have that I will send music to if I'm working on something, the vast majority of them are either filmmakers or they work in graphic design,
Yeah.
almost no musicians. Because
Yeah.
musicians are always like, oh man, that's cool, I like that, you know, but like
Yeah.
graphic designers come from like a group critique, you know, art school background where they'll be like, this is fucking terrible. Like they will just straight up tell you if something's not working or it feels weird. So I feel like I always get honest opinions out of graphic designers more so than musicians. And so I think, but I also think like graphic design as a gateway to music is kind of fascinating too, because, you know, your music is so, it's dependent upon layers, you know, like, and not just layers of sounds, but like there's also, there's a real like layer of grit that goes over, there's like textures of things that get laid onto these sounds that create your sound. And so, you know, which is kind of, makes perfect sense if you've ever looked at Photoshop or like a, you know, worked in design. Like there's a lot of texturing and things like that. But I think like also it's interesting for you to like circle into the business, the music business, which sucks. Coming from a graphic design background and dealing with clients and dealing with chasing money and work and all that kind of shit. Like, do you feel like when you finally came into the fold and started doing bigger things, like I guess, you know, as you started to come into the Ghostly sort of community, do you think all of that time you spent as a graphic designer like helped you, like basically, you know, was a good primer for getting into the music business?
I believe it was, yes. I remember, you know, because the only reason I worked in graphic design was because I was into music from the get-go, and I met a buddy, and I used to do drum and bass, and then went from that into advertising because, you know, he got me a job and hooked me up, and then a couple agencies down the road, you know, this tour came up with this with the Com Truise project, and I put my 2 weeks in, and I you know, early on I was very happy to have, because I worked for a pharmaceutical agency, so it was really strict. It wasn't like the most, you know, it was really high quality photography and like crazy amounts of text. You know, it was just very basic stuff. But, you know, when you deal with those kind of clients and the government on top of that, like you have to be really you're just really confined to what you can do and what you can't. So I think like just all that organization that I had, which I definitely I'm losing as the days go by, that kind of discipline. But early on, it definitely helped me write music a lot faster, you know. And you know, I just remember going to work and just thinking about music all day and just doing the work, getting it done, going home, staying up till like 4 a.m. and writing music. But like I was on that cycle where I just was inspired across the board, and like really just like everything was going right. And then, you know, it's just been 12 years since then. So it's like,
was Ghostly the jumping off? So like at what point were you like, okay, I'm ready to sort of piece out of this graphic design stuff and go full-time music?
Yes, it was Ghostly, but it was more the tour, you know. I was just going to do that long tour and then, you know, see what was what at the end. I didn't didn't really worry about, you know, I always thought I would be able to get another graphic design job if it didn't really work out. But then it just kind of, stuff just started happening, and here we are.
How did
many years later?
Ghostly didn't happen for you like as a demo though. Didn't you have like a connection through like a lawyer or something?
I put the Cyanide Sisters EP out on a net label called Amdiscs, and one of the A&R people from Ghostly also ran the sister label Mood Gadget. I don't know if you remember them.
Yeah.
And he hit me up wanting to release something, and at the time I had my lawyer, who I currently still have, Matt Cutler. He is who. Okay, so let's backtrack. Are we recording, or is this all?
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay.
We've been recording the whole time.
Okay, good. So I remember when MySpace was still, you know, the place to do shit. I put my music up there, and the EP was out, and one day I got a message from Neon Indian, and I was like, what is this? This is going to be like an ad, or so I opened it up, and it was them asking me to do a remix they wanted me to remix something. They had just done all the remixes for the record, but they were doing something with Mountain Dew. So that's when I did those two remixes for them through the Green Label Sound thing. After that was all wrapped up, like a week after, this guy Matt Cutler wrote to me and he was like, "Hey man, I just wanted to say I really like your stuff. I'm one of the attorneys for Neon Indian, and he's like, I found your music on this what was it, All Music or something website, I don't know." And he was like, I don't know if you'd like to come into the city and sit down and talk about, what you're looking to do. And I was like, totally, So I went in one day and we had lunch and I sat in the office and we just chatted and, he was kind of, on my team from the get-go. And then, the Mood Gadget guy reached out and we were kind of like, it was just a very boilerplate kind of deal. And he was like, we should wait and see what else down the road. So we were like, well, we're gonna hold off on agreeing to anything right now. And like a week later, I was back in the city, sitting down with Sam and Jeff from Ghostly and talking about, what do I want to do with this project? Do I want to just make music, and release it, or do I want to tour and all that stuff? And I was like, I don't really know. I'm kind of just taking it one step at a time. Whatever comes my way, I guess I'll give it a good think. And then, they said we want to re-release the EP, and it was just kind of. I signed maybe 2, 3. I think 3 were in the third agreement, just re-signing for different. The first agreement was like 3 records and 4 EPs or something like that, and now we're just going. Record deal to record deal, agreement.
Yeah. What year was what year was the first one?
2010, 9-ish.
Yeah, I was gonna say the music business has changed dramatically.
Yeah,
since
like
then.
this
Yes.
sounds as foreign as I could even possibly imagine.
Just the idea of like the old notion of like a 360 deal where they are like, we own your brand and you're gonna do this many records. Like I feel like no labels, unless maybe it's like Warner or somebody, but like no small labels, boutique labels are doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember on those early days too, like the MySpace days, and SoundCloud was still new, and like I used to be able to find so much cool music. I can't even go on SoundCloud anymore. I don't even use it. I don't use it at all. The label uploads my stuff to it when stuff comes. I just like, it's just it's like a tire fire over there. It's just so much stuff. Like it's really hard to find new music. I've been listening to like jazz lately a lot, like early 80s synth jazz and stuff. Like,
I feel like the older
I'm
I get,
over the place.
I feel like the older I get, the further back I go. I just I hit a space where, and it's probably like right around that time, like mid early 2000s, where like, everything was about blogs. Blogs were really important to discovering new music. And then everything just got so accelerated to where I was like, I literally can't keep up with this anymore. So I'm just going to go listen to some Coltrane or some dusty old vinyl. No, I think that's interesting because like I think a lot of people have this misconception about the music business that like some A&R guy finds you and then they're like, we got to sign you to a deal. And I think a lot of people underestimate the power of like going out and doing remixes and meeting. Like I've heard so many stories from people and have so many friends who, their entry point to a deal was a lawyer, like an entertainment lawyer, who just knew people, because lawyers know everybody. Like it's just the truth, And so it's just, I think it's interesting. I was reading a story the other day about Chris Christopherson was saying how he was in the army or something, and he's in the Air Force, and he had been writing songs on guitar, and he was really thinking that these were good, and he wanted to do that full time. And so he took his tapes and he borrowed a helicopter and he landed it on Johnny Cash's, like his estate, just landed it in the yard and walked up to the house with the tapes and like a bottle of whiskey or something and was like, I'm going to play you this music. And that's how he got discovered.
Wow.
It's like, I'm all about like just super random, story. Cause the music business itself is like patently absurd. And I think that like, I think for a lot of people out there, I know a lot of people who make music and stuff listen to this podcast, and it's like, I don't think there are really rules anymore, especially now. I think everything's just on the table. It doesn't, it's, you just see where it goes,
Yeah. I feel like not that long ago, there was a logical path on how to do it, sort of, or roughly. These are some of the steps. Now I don't even know if I was just starting like I don't know how it even works, because like I just feel like we're consuming music so quickly and just it's just constant, like new stuff. I'm still all about I like doing the full record. I don't want to. I like EPs because they're smaller conceptually. Mm-hmm. But the single culture is like really, I don't know, because I do DJ sometimes. I'm like, so I am going into other genres and looking at how that music is just constantly, there's stuff coming out all the time. It's crazy. Like, I don't know.
We're kind of competing with Spotify culture too. Like, I think you have a lot of artists. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's like when you look at new records that come out, the tracks, there's a ton of tracks in pop music that are like 2.5 minutes long.
Yeah.
And I grew up thinking like 3 minutes was the kind of standard, minimum, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, there'll be a track that's like just over 2 minutes that racks up like 800 billion streams or something, and it's like, there is kind of a race, I think, to figure out how to game the system a little bit, because it's all based on a streaming metric now, instead of just some type of whatever the expression is,
Matt, I want to add something to that. What's interesting, the 3-minute song length, it came from radio advertisers, so they could play so many songs in the old days and fit so many advertisements in, so that was your gold standard. But that's the same thing sort of now, where it's changed to a different system, so it's affected the commercial business aspect, has affected the music again and made it shorter.
Yeah. Good old commerce dictating art.
Yes.
That's how it goes. I mean,
My question as a clueless person is, when it comes to streams, does it only count if somebody listens to the whole thing? Or if they just listen to a little bit of it? Because I would think if a song was shorter, you'd have more of a chance of completing it, thus counting towards a stream.
It's possible. Well, Spotify's interesting because there's tiers. So like if you're a paying customer, a paying customer listens to your music, you get more royalty than if someone who's on like a non-premium account. And it's all just fractions of pennies basically. Yeah. But and I think the streaming culture is interesting. Like, I have very mixed feelings about Spotify, because Spotify's great. I mean, you can find literally anything. I remember a kid, I grew up in Cleveland, and it's like I'd go to the record den at the Great Northern Mall, and I'd be digging through the bins trying to find Warp Records releases, and you'd pull out a thing and you're like, okay, this came out on Warp, and you'd go and you'd plop down $16 for it without even hearing it, just because you're like, I like that label. And now it's like you could find anything ever made ever, at the click of a button, really, which I think is good and bad. I think that you lose the experience of hunting for things in like a record store, but you also get artists that I think are coming around now who are more diverse, or more of a smorgasbord of influence, because it's all there.
Yes.
Even if you grow up in the middle of nowhere, you still have access to like African ska music or something ridiculous, there's all of it's there all the time.
I agree.
I don't know.
It's I remember even when not that long ago when I lived in Brooklyn, my favorite thing was to just hit the record shops with no intentions and just like literally judge books by their cover, and I'd just buy so many records. This looks cool. Oh, this is from '82. Like, it's got to be, and then take it all home and like, drink beers and listen to it, and then find that you found some like incredible music. Now, you can just literally have it all at your fingertips, and as far as the platforms are concerned, I mean, I don't know. That's just the world we live in now. I don't. To hate them, I guess, would be too strong, but like I definitely, some are better than others, obviously, and I'm not even talking about financial gain from them. I'm just, like, I'd like to use Apple Music more because, but I just hate the UI. Like, I can't, it's this terrible UI, and Spotify, they're constantly changing stuff up. Like, I just saw, I don't know when it updated, or I must have missed, when it did, but the shuffle button is like in a internal thing now, so like it's not right there. So I was like, whenever I listen, I like to use the New Music Friday on the playlist they generate for it. Usually it's full shit, you know. It's like a bunch of, like really strange hip hop. I'm like, how did this even get in my? I don't, you know. I listen to like 90s, you know.
You listen to
Queen's
20 seconds of
hip-hop.
one thing.
Yeah.
Hey there, TPA listeners, Eric here. Sorry for interrupting, but this is the part where we do some shameless self-promotion. And we'd like to give our sincere thanks for listening to the show. And we are just as surprised as you are for listening. But since you're here, we'd like to highly encourage you to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, for all things The Paradise Arcade, you can also visit us on theparadisearcade.com. Please like, share, and review our episodes. We like interacting with you. We like to hear your feedback. What's your favorite part of the interview? What you thought was interesting? Who we should get on the show next? Those are all important things that we'd like to hear. And the last thing, if you really like the show and you want more and you want to contribute, you could do something for us. You can find us on Patreon. You can contribute as little or as much as you want. On Patreon, you'll find some exclusive content that we will continue to update. Mostly, we just want to say thanks for listening. We appreciate you. So let's get back to it.
It's a motherfucking paradise arcade.
Once.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. We're definitely, I don't know, we're not getting away from it. You know, the platforms and streaming.
The comment you made about record store shopping kind of brings me to another question for you, which is aesthetic. You know, like you're a super aesthetic guy, like everything, and you're also kind of a rare thing in that a lot of people, you know, will release records. Like if I'm going to release a record, I'm going to go to somebody that I like who's a graphic designer. I'm going to say, and I'm very much in the camp of like, I'm not a graphic designer, so I'm going to hand this to you and you're going to finish this because you understand. Like we'll talk about it, but like I don't see myself in a position to tell somebody how to do their job because that's something I don't do. But you're the rare breed where like you have a very strong control over your graphic design presence, your visual presence, the aesthetic presence of Com Truise. So, you know, how much does aesthetic obviously figures into a lot of music, but it's like aesthetic seems to be a strong point for you. Like you said, buying records just because of how they look. How much does aesthetic play into like gear for you?
Yeah, a bit, I guess. You know, I'd say it's definitely the advertising, which makes me fall heavily on the visual sword. I definitely see where sometimes I shoot myself in the foot, you know, so far as like when the record's done and then I got to do all the art or vice, you know, and then all the advertising materials and all this different sizing. But, you know, I'll get in those moods where I'm like super into it and I'm just like pounding coffee and just, you know, resizing, you know, record sleeves. But I mean, as far as like gear is concerned, do you mean like
literally like what it looks like, you know?
Like some stuff,
it's interesting because we like, you know, I remember, you know, like recently Dave Smith passed away, and talking about Dave Smith, you know, sequential. I think he is underappreciated in the realm of. I mean, obviously the guy created MIDI, but the Mofo was kind of like the first synth out of the gate that was like an affordable analog synth. And I know you were a fan of the Mofo, like when it first came out, and like I have the module, and I've got a bunch of Dave Smith synths, you know, and I love them; they're great. But you know, the Mofo was a fucking ugly.
Oh, so
keyboard.
ugly.
It was like yellow
and
had
like
like
a school bus.
Yeah, and it had like real weird.
The logo, I hated them.
Yeah, it's sitting on the desk. I'm staring at it right now. It's like Dave Smith's name is kind of in that script font. And then the Mofo text looks like an old Rusted Root album cover or something. It just looks terrible. And I think that like aesthetically, it's like I look at a lot of gear, and especially nowadays, it's like you get into things like Eurorack and stuff like that. It's like it's a huge. There's just so much shit out there to like parse through, right? And he really kicked the door open for analog synths to sort of be, accessible for people and also. Affordable. I think he kind of did it first, and then Moog kind of jumped on the train, and then everybody else sort of followed suit. Because there was a stretch there in the like 90s where you'd go in Guitar Center and it would just be every synth was just a digital piece of shit with like all these lights, and you go in and they'd be like, you like lights and knobs? Like that's how they sold synthesizers.
All those workstations and things like that.
And I just think I'm curious to get your take on like how you approach, like obviously I feel like aesthetics are super important. So like if a synth looks weird, is it less usable to you?
Yeah, I guess I'd say I'm a little, you know, like if it's, you know, I think everything I have in here right now is pretty minimal design.
Yeah.
Classic, you know, nothing crazy. I'm definitely picky with it, I'd say. And I just really haven't been buying all that much stuff lately. I had a Buchla system that's coming soon that I built.
Cool.
Or that I had built, obviously. But I mean, you know, that's what I'm trying to get into a little bit more. And yeah, I got all the Eurorack stuff, and yeah, there are some like I will say in that space there are some modules that they might seem like they do cool stuff, but I can't wrap my head around the way they look. Like if it's
exactly.
Does it have to look so confusing? You know, like I don't know. I like the cleanliness and things. You know.
Yeah, I have a friend.
Not my office, obviously.
I have a buddy who like will not get into make noise at all because he's like everything looks like it's a fucking Klingon spaceship. Like I can't, I can't do
hieroglyphics.
Yeah, and but yeah, I think that like from an aesthetic standpoint, you know, music. I always tell people, going back to the kids, you know, the kids that are sending the emails, like, how do I get into this? The only thing I ever tell people is like workflow. Figure out your workflow. You know, it's the same in whatever industry you're in. Could be graphic design, could be, you know, anything. If your workflow is shit, you're not going to get anywhere. You know, you have to sort of figure it out. And I think aesthetically, a lot of, you know, I go back and I look at the science fiction films that I watched in the 80s that were inspirational to me. And, you know, like when Vangelis died, I watched Blade Runner again, and I hadn't seen it in a minute. I've probably seen that movie 200 times, but like every time I watch it, there's little aesthetic things that I like just forgot about, you know, like this last time it was when he calls Sean Young on that little video phone when he's like in the thing, and I'm sitting there and I'm like looking at the design and like just the typefaces and the sort of UI of the thing, and the screen has that nice like patina and like a grid. It's like all of it is so incredibly well, like just that scene I was just like, man, Blade Runner 2049 was a piece of shit, you know, when you think about like comparatively, and I think like, but when I look around my studio, I'm like, you know, I think all of those things definitely had an influence on how I do the things I do and like the way I work, you know, my workflow specifically.
I've always thought the same thing, like going back and watching, I always see something different, but my whole thing has always been I focus on the way like that someone had to come up with this futuristic looking technology, and it wasn't even, and now we're watching it, you know, it's from the past, you know, but we're in the future and nothing remotely looks like that stuff. It's like, it's all, you know, when you watch like the Alien, any of the franchise, like you know, all the different symbols and the CRT graphics and things like that. I always find those to be the most inspiring, and I might not even be inspired by the actual story, but it's like those moments, you know, when it's like they're pulling up some computer graphics, or like when they're looking at the map in Aliens and they're trying to find where everybody's beacons are, you know, like I love those. Someone had to come up with that. It's incredible to me, like, you know, with the technology they had back then, you know, like now people are trying to recreate it and it doesn't even have the same vibe, you know. It's like
real shiny, everything's shiny now. You know, they lost all the grit. I think it's funny because I think, you know, going back, you look at something like Blade Runner or any of the science fiction movies from that era and you're like, you know, we were promised this Sid Mead future and instead we got like, I can DoorDash a burrito, you know, like essentially where we landed.
Well, the IKEA version of it.
Yeah,
we've opted for convenience instead of actual like meaningful, useful things.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's led to a whole different result of what the future is.
Yeah, I want the blueprint colored overhead projector map.
Yes.
from aliens. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So touring, you're talking about touring a little bit and how touring is maybe numbered for you. Talk a little bit. I was just kind of curious, playing a show as an electronic musician is a very slippery slope.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I saw you come through Nashville with Clark. I think that's when I met you at that show.
Yep.
And that was a really inspired bill. I enjoyed that bill because it was like Clark is sort of this weird, brutal, anomaly, I think, to the Warp community. I think when he first came out, everybody was sort of like, is this guy sort of, he's like Aphex kind of esque, but he's definitely clearly in his own lane. And he makes music that makes people want to dance, but it's also kind of like fucking with you as you're dancing to it, because it constantly feels like it's about to fall apart. And so I feel like you had a lot of kids that were there that were just like, yeah, but I think there was also a lot of fans of your stuff that were there that were sort of like, what am I supposed to do with this right now? Because it was different, but nonetheless, like still a very powerful, like live presence. It's like touring for you, like, obviously I'm sure it's evolved over time, technology wise.
It's evolved and devolved. I don't really know what I want to do anymore, and it's also, it's a very costly part of music, not just touring or traveling, but the, doing the show to specific standards, like you have to you have to blow people's minds. You can't, it's really, especially as an electronic artist, when you're standing up there with a few keyboards or whatever, and it's not really, I've always focused heavily on the visuals, and I had the little Pentagon stand I stood on for a while, and that was that was fun and everything. I don't know. Now I'm just, I don't know. I'm close to 40. Like I enjoy being home. I liked for a while after the pandemic kind of lessened a bit. And stuff started to pick back up. I was just doing like weekend shows, I'd just fly for a Friday or a Saturday show, and I'd be home Sunday, afternoon, and have the whole week, which I really liked. But I don't know if thinking about it at this moment while I'm talking to you guys right now, like I can't imagine like being on the road for like a month, like that just seems painful to me now.
I think a lot of people too don't understand that when you're touring as a somewhat independent, like you're, it's like, yeah, you're on Ghostly, but I'm sure like, you're as an artist, you're bearing the brunt of the process of touring. Oh, yeah. And most of the time as an electronic artist, you're the only one, like I've toured before with bands, and it's like the band has like 7 people in it. Yeah. And they're all loading out and loading in and doing, and it's like, nope, it's just me. So I'm loading in all my shit, setting up all my shit, setting up all my merch, sit at the merch table, then it's my turn to play, then I go back to the merch table, and then at 1 a.m. they kick everybody out, and then maybe you're lucky to get loaded out by like 2 a.m, and then you rinse and repeat. And that takes a toll. I mean, it's a lot of work.
Night after night, yeah. I did the last long stint I did, I was basically gone for like 3 months, and never again. It was too much. It's unhealthy, unsustainable, really, for unless I mean, if you have a huge team and that's you don't really have to, if you just get up there and play the music, but there's people that set everything up, load everything out, just take care of it, I've had situations where it's been a little of that, like the bare minimum of like just having extra people.
Sure.
But not having that have really forced me to kind of really, really limit what I'm traveling with. Like I don't bring the vintage synths out anymore. Like I'm not,
everything breaks.
There's so much shit to carry too. It's like I'm only one dude, and then people, I do a one-off, and then people are like, do you have any merch? And I'm like, well, I mean, dude, I flew here today, this morning. Like,
I'm flying out. Good.
I guess I could bring a small case with me, but that just seems, I don't know. I don't know.
It's a pain in the ass. I mean, it's like very, like I came into Minneapolis to play a show for these guys, and like I just had a separate suitcase that I threw some records and like some T-shirts and junk into, just to have. It wasn't a lot, but it was a pain in the ass hauling it. And I landed in Minneapolis, and it snowed a foot that day.
Yep.
But like, I think that, you know, like there's something I think to be said for the real sort of grunt work of doing a tour and doing it by yourself, and then also the expense. You know, like, I'm sure going out for 3 months, you're looking at it and going, okay, well, I'm going to anticipate to make this much money from ticket sales, but then you got to print all your merch, you got to get your shirts made, you got to do, you know, all the different assets of like things that have to, and then you have to look after all that shit, and you got to chase venues to get paid, and you got to, it's like 5 full-time jobs basically on top of playing the music.
And everybody takes their cut, and taxes and all. It's a lot of work. I guess everybody probably thinks it's just one giant party. You know, I think people do think that, and it's not. It's not. Like there was, you know, I drank heavily for years when touring, just to to kill the pain. You know, I try to limit it for the most part these days. But yeah, that was you know, it was always nice to like do a show and just, you know, maybe have a slight buzz, have a couple beers, maybe do one shot with somebody or something like that, and then, you know, you'd go to the hotel and you would be sober for the most part, and you'd sleep and wake up, and then, you know, but like those days and days of drinking, you know, bottle of whiskey a night, like I can't do it anymore. Those days are gone.
Yeah, no, I think it's an easy I mean, I feel like during COVID, there's a lot of people that function in the world right now who are like functional alcoholics and are now starting to realize it. They're like, oh fuck, I was drinking a lot during COVID, and now I've got a real problem. Touring is absolutely that, because it's just, you know, and I'm naturally an introverted person, so like, if for me to get up on a stage and perform sucks, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, same here.
So, you know, a little liquid courage goes a long way.
The mask helps too.
It's part of the sort of like, you know, terrain of touring, of just putting up with bullshit and having to you know, I will shit on touring all the time, but I had a lot of fun playing in Minneapolis.
So that's just because we're here.
Yeah. No, I've been telling people for a while now, like, that it was one of those rare occurrences where you land to play a show, everybody turns out to be really nice. You guys are like foodies, so everywhere we ate was amazing. The venue was cool. Like, every aspect, like no aspect of the trip sucked, aside from the fact that it snowed a foot, which was cool. Right. I mean, I was like, cool snow, you know. But like, aside
it definitely made it interesting.
Aside from the winter tundra, like, you know, it was a great experience. You don't always get those though. Sometimes you land to play a show, and it's like the promoters are assholes. No one wants to talk to you. Or everybody wants to talk to you, and that's can be equally horrible, because you're just like, all right, guys.
Like, I just flew here like 6 hours on a plane, and like, I'm not really going to get much sleep tonight because I leave, you know, tomorrow morning. Like, let's bang this out and call it a day. But you gotta, and it's, you know, I've always felt like you do have to cater to people a little bit and kind of, you know, which is fine. I wouldn't say I'm a mean person, you know, like, but yes, I'm introverted, but you know, I'll talk to people, but I just think, man, it's different these days too, with going, you know, the pandemic and stuff has made everyone socially awkward now. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels, even if I go to the grocery store, I went the other day and I was like, I don't know why, but I just felt super fucking weird. Like, it just, everything feels really weird out there right now. And, you know, I live in Florida, so it's always weird. But I don't know. Yeah, there are those shows you have that are incredible, and like, everything is just like perfect. And then there are, you know, those middle of the week shows, those Wednesday shows, they put you in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, those are the rough ones. But there are people that come out who are like, I'm so glad you came to my city. Like, I can't believe this. Like, I didn't have to drive like 6 hours to see you. You know what I mean? And that
the
makes
silver lining. Yeah.
You gotta really, I don't know. You gotta humble yourself sometimes, I think, you know.
There's something about the component of that too, where like, you have slaved over a process of like making your art, making your work, putting it out there, sometimes those things have emotional meaning for you. You know, you've written something that it represents some period in your life, and then you put it out, and it goes into the hands of people out there who listen to it, who then reinterpret it, recontextualize it to their life or what shit they've gone through. And it's kind of nice. It's like sort of a release. It's like a catharsis of like, okay, it's yours now. It's not mine anymore. You know?
Yeah. I always thought that was my favorite. My favorite part of my music is that I kind of always tried to leave it open-ended as far as interpretation. Like, it means something to me, but it could mean something completely different to you, and that's totally fine. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to like force my messages on you. You know what I mean? I'm just, it's out there. I got rid of it. Now you take it and do what you want with it. You know, that's the fun thing about music for me, I think.
Yeah, it's
definitely a release. Yeah,
there's a nice like ambiguity to it where people can just, you know, find their own interpretation, find their own context for it. And I mean, go ahead.
Hey, Matt. So I've got a question for both of you. You're both introverts, but you operate in the public domain. You release things into the world where people are going to interact with it, and they're going to have an emotional response to it. Is it a way for you, both of you, to maybe connect with other people, to feel a human connection? Whereas like a typical social situation, you know, Seth, you're talking about being, you know, uncomfortable with around large groups of people or a lot of people. It's a way to maybe connect on an emotional human level to someone else without having to deal with that uncomfortability, that anxiety of conversation, because, you know, everybody has different social skills and ability to communicate and feel understood. And both of you guys, I think, and especially Matt, you know, I think you put your need to emotionally connect, or that a need for connection, into the music. And so is that a way for you guys to connect and feel connected to other people?
I think for me, the music kind of acts as a buffer, you know, like when you play a show and then you talk to people after, you're not necessarily talking about extremely personal things. You know what I mean? You're kind of, you're either talking about music or, you know, stuff that's in the immediate, you know, kind of space. I think the music for me is a way to shield myself a bit from having those conversations that really, you know what I mean? Like we were so, we were just so overloaded with stuff, all the time. And I just, it's kind of, it's, I don't know. I'd like to think of it as, it's like a way for me to hide in plain sight, you know, kind of. I hide behind the music, you know, like, hiding in a way like I'm afraid, but like, you know, like there's certain things that, you know, you just, people don't need to know, you know, like just life stuff. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that there's an element of the music speaks so I don't have to, you know, and so you can stroll into a conversation with people, and they know everything they need to know because they listen to the music and they either like it or they don't, you know, and there's a definite economy in there that's like, you know, it is that sort of, there's an emotional transaction that's taking place that has nothing to do with anything that's been said. It's all just, you know, how it relates to you, which is actually, it's so much different than talking. Like I could sit in a room and talk to somebody and not have near the effect that it might have on them just from music, because so much of it is experiential. You know, they're having an experience with it. And because you can listen to a song and it'll always be connected to a time or a place or, you know, some emotional event, or there's an element of nostalgia to it or something like that. And, you know, if you think about all the conversations you've had over the course of your life, I mean, I would imagine many of them they could be tied to like some event, but many of them you're not going to go, oh yeah, remember that conversation I had that one time and when I was in New York, or, you know, whatever. It's like so much music, it just has that immediately. And so I think it's it's cool. It's cool how that works. I mean, it's an added benefit of, especially for an introverted person, to be able to just sidestep that
Yeah.
and just let the music do its thing.
It's kind of like a callback to what you said earlier about someone saying, "Oh, I have all your albums and I know you."
Exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, you can hide in plain sight in that way. It's like you don't people know you as a whatever iteration of the thing is that they have experienced through the records, and you can just sort of fuck off and do your own thing and not have to worry about telling anybody anything. You can just sort of sit there and be like, I'm just here to do the music and go home. I personally, like, when I play shows, I hate being on stage. I don't like it at all. I feel like, and especially with electronic music, I almost always love playing shows. If I can tour with like a rock band, I would rather do that because, especially on an electronic bill, it's like after the first person plays, it's over. Like the jig is up. It's gonna be a bunch of dudes with laptops. Nowadays, it's like a bunch of dudes with. Everybody's kind of shifting away from laptops, but it's like for a while it was like, okay, we're just gonna watch these people make Excel spreadsheets. An hour and a half.
Could you do that? Would you incorporate that into a show? Like,
yeah,
That's the visuals. Just
that's the visuals.
crunching.
I liked.
Crunching
I
spreadsheets.
remember Adam Hart had a setup where he played a live set with an MPC, and he had the screen from the MPC was his visual. And I feel like MPCs, when you're making music on MPCs, it's very like menu divey and like process oriented and like all these commands and like you're changing. So it's just this guy standing. I think a lot of times he had like a suit on, and I think he's German, and he'd stand up there and he'd just be like, in the background would just be like these little incremental changes in things on the screen as he was playing that like green and black like terminal.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I always appreciated that. I was like, that's very, it's very bold. There's nothing flashy about it. It's like either you're into this or you're not. I'm sorry if you're not.
Yeah, I really feel that like that really is laying it out exactly as it is. Like it's not trying to be anything other than what it is. And as you said, you either like it or you don't.
Yeah.
I kind of really have to give credit where credit's due. Going back to the Excel thing. So we had an Excel like instructor come into my work to give classes on that.
What a job.
And the stuff that she was doing in Excel was like enthralling. It was amazing what she was doing. So if that happened to be the background of what was going on at a show, I would be way more into that than say like the Windows 95-esque screensaver that you'd see at a Dream Theater concert or something.
Hey, Seth, I've got a question for you to wrap around to, your diving into, scoring work. How has that affected you in your own creative process? Has that had a shift? Because, like what I've noticed, like with interviews with Trent Reznor, it seemed to have a major fundamental shift in how he creates music with Nine Inch Nails now, the scoring and interacting with people and having to take feedback, and and he's spoken about how it's really shifted how he does music now. Has it had any effect on your own personal creative output looping back around?
I would say that I always thought I thought cinematically with my music, or maybe I tried to, but now I think I really understand what that means. So I think, I think, stuff going forward will definitely have a much more cinematic feel. But, we were talking earlier about, sending music to musicians and how it's really kind of that doesn't really do any good. I only really share my music with my lawyer because he's like a music nerd, that's really what he is. So he's the only person that, that I really share it with before anybody hears it. So I can sometimes I consider him the client or the test subject, I'll send stuff to the label too, but it's always minimal feedback. I mean, they're just letting me do whatever the hell I want to do. I'm unsure of how, it will really affect me, because it's, I just did the film, and we'll see when I sit down to really write the record. It's like it'll be interesting.
I think when I first started getting into scoring things more often, I was doing like short films, and then slowly that kind of grew into, feature work. And
Mm-hmm.
what I found was, I feel like a lot of my music feels, at least to me anyways, feels very accidental. It's like every time I sit down to make a record, I'm like, how the fuck do I make a record again?
Yeah.
And like, but a lot of it is just like I'll stumble into a sound or I'll stumble into a thing, and I'm like, okay, this feels good, and then I just sort of see where it goes. And a lot of times the music just tells me this is where it needs to be. It sounds real,
Yes,
airy fairy, but it's like that's
but
what
it's
it is.
true. Yeah.
And I found that after I started collaborating with people on visual things, it was harder. When I came back to like write stuff on my own, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make something for me. I had this moment where I was just like, okay, I kind of have to relearn this, because suddenly I'm going back and I'm like, I'm back to just doing it all myself. I don't have the visual thing to
crutch, basically.
Yeah. And
I feel the same way, and I think that's why I'm feeling the way I have lately since the film was finished. Was like I was getting not an insane amount of direction, but a good amount of feedback on a daily basis for a few months. And then I went and did 2 commercials, and that was even crazier, much shorter time span, way more like intense feedback coming from all angles at all hours, like,
Yeah.
And then, so it is, I'm like, okay, you're right. It's like, oh, now I got to write something myself. Like, what do I go on? Like, what do I, that's why I've always like tried to make a pretty solid concept for my music, because I need that, or I'm just I don't know how I would really finish anything if I didn't have that driving it, So it is, I think I'm in that transition period where I'm kind of figuring out how to go back to, figuring out what I want to say or sound like,
I would always have like if I went and saw a show, or if I listened to a record, I'd be like, man, music is always inspiring, but it's not ever something where I have an experience with music and I'm like, I want to go write music right now. Like, I don't think I've ever come away from a show or something and been like, I need to go home and make some music. Film absolutely does that for me.
Same.
And I think where I kind of landed after I started doing more score, where I started scoring all these podcasts, and it was like, once I started doing that stuff, it was great because I could itch this scratch that I had that musically I couldn't accomplish with the project that I put music out under. So it was like getting to do all these, and they're all different, which is also great. So it's like you get to do different things and try different things, and you just say fuck it and go for it. But then I would turn around and I'd come back and I would have this problem we're talking about. And I just started like, I went back to like my high school girl, basically went and got Tumblr and just started. Tumblr is like my a constantly evolving mood board.
Yes, I've always.
I could never bring myself to do Pinterest, but I feel like I'd never forgive myself. But with Tumblr, like I just go in and I just follow all these kind of science fiction-y kind of things, and I'll just throw stuff. And I honestly like it. I have a couple monitors right in the studio, like in front of me, and I have Tumblr's always open. Like it's always the main page, just that has all the images, and I just kind of feed off of that. And I found that it's helpful to me to do that transition from like score work back into like writing for myself, because I can just look at something and just feel inspired by it, and it's not directly tied to it doesn't have to be like any finite thing of like this is what the record is. It's like, well, no, just I'm looking at these images and they're just inspiring me.
Stimulating, definitely. I will say that I did go down the Pinterest hole, but I use it from time to time. But I definitely do like having. It's like sometimes I'll just put a movie with the sound off on my iPad next to me and just like have it going. Just I don't know. It's just that seeing those moving images, even if I'm not necessarily drawing inspiration from it, it's just something about like that visual element that's like I don't know. It just kind of it's like keeps your mind moving, I think.
what's the flip side of that? Because I mean, like you just had the thing with HBO animation where they just made it, which was fantastic. I mean, just really awesome. But so how does that feel? How does it feel to like have music that you've made then go through the other way, where a bunch of animators are then being influenced by that and creating something amazing?
It's cool to see. It's that whole thing we were talking about of how you put it out there with whatever is behind it for you, and then seeing how it's interpreted by other people, whether that just be visually or if someone sends you a message and says, "Oh, this song makes me feel," or just did this for me, or whatever. It was very interesting, and I don't know. I like that, but I used to be a real stickler about. You can't. No, I don't want it. It's got to be all me, But I'm definitely loosening up to like, experimenting with other people more as far as like visuals are concerned. Because I'm like, I'm just, I'm getting older. I guess we all are. But I'm just realizing that like the time it takes to do all of it, all the time for just is a lot. It's time consuming, and like. I'm just realizing what I really should focus on, and those kind of things, kind of slowly open the door for more of that, because I like my graphic style, my aesthetic, but it might be time to explore some different things, and I think I was afraid for a long time of like how to do that, like. If I switch it up, is it gonna have the same thing? I really haven't found a way to do that, but I think these kind of things and getting this stuff in front of people, even just like doing the film, like that's a different way for people to interpret my music. So maybe they'd be more open to change. You know what I mean? Because I remember like, doing the Declination with Joel Ford doing the vocals, which were very alien. They're not really like full on, people were like, "Oh, where's the instrumental?" Like I'm like, are we so closed off that like you can't just let me experiment? Like
Yeah.
So I think that's a way to like, clear out the clutter and like.
Well, you also have kind of the thing where it's like the whole argument with like Skrillex, right? Where people are like they hear dubstep and they go Skrillex. It's like Kleenex, like it's it owns the brand. And I feel like, if whatever you want to call the genre of music that you make, I think there's like 5 or 6 different wave names. There's definitely like a sonic sound that you own that is like your thing. And like, I think that it's got to be I could see totally where it's got to be very confining for you, because you're like, I want to have an aesthetic control. I want to maintain this brand, whatever, sonically and visually. But then people come along. I mean, licensing music is always a slippery slope, because you end up with, I've had music and films and stuff, and I'll go to see the film and I want to throw up the entire time before the song kicks in, because I'm just like, how the fuck did they use it? Because a lot of times they just take it and you don't even get to know. Like, it's just sort of like, send us the stems, and you're like, you hope for the best. And, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good. But it is like a very nerve-wracking experience, because you're looking at it and it's impossible for you to see it subjectively, because you're just like,
you're never going to be able to.
And the music you made it the way you made it, when you made it, how you made it, and now it's suddenly slapped on like a movie or something, and you're like, okay, and
and then your immediate circle, your friends, your team, your family, they're all just super stoked on it, but like inside you're like, I remember when I did the Coinbase commercial for the Super Bowl, and so I had my girlfriend and her parents, they were all over, and I was cooking food and stuff, and I remember when it came on, I was like, I literally wanted to puke. I was like, oh my god, this is crazy, this is crazy. Like, I could still feel that feeling, like and then you're just like, wow, it's this, what is the reaction going to be? And then it was just it was very hard for me to watch the film that I did, the private property. I finally just watched it like 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever. I bought it on iTunes and we sat down and watched it, and it was like, it was really weird to like watch it as a done product, as like something that you could go buy, and not like, you know, the way I watched it with the time code and, you know, just chopped up and not really fluent. You know, it was really weird to see it all put together because, you know, I synced everything up and sent it to the you know, the engineer, and he laid it all in, and then couple months down the road it was out, and I was like, all right, you know. But
is it I'm kind of curious, like, so is it because a lot of times in film, right, if you're scoring something, they send you a cut, and usually it's an early cut, so it's not been graded, it looks like shit. Sometimes if there's visual effects, those aren't in there. As a person who comes from essentially two disciplines that are heavily process oriented, so like you have a track and it's like, all right, I'm going to make a little drum thing, and then I'm going to add the bass, and then I'm going to add this, and I'm going to add this, and it's like you in your mind are comfortable with it, you know, because you understand there's going to be an end result. I know I'm going to get there. Same with graphic design. Is it hard for you when you get sent something that's unfinished and looks shitty to suddenly then have to write music against said shittiness?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I was lucky because the film was pretty close for the most part to like what I really didn't see. I mean, some things were adjusted, and, you know, timing was changed and things like that. But, and, you know, when I did the Coinbase commercial, that was like, they changed the graphic style like 30 times in like a week, you know? So it was like, you know, it was incredible to work on, but it was also like really nerve-wracking. Like I couldn't like sleep very well because I was like, just they're gonna have feedback, you know, when's it coming, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, I'm doing another thing right now where it is very much early cut, so it's like, you know, some stuff happens and then just cuts to black because there's no effects or anything. It's being worked on. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll write this, I guess, you know, and then just like adjust it when, you know, it's closer or whatever. So it is hard to like, it's definitely hard to do that when there's like, it's not really all that put together. And it's hard to write music to things that are you know, ugly, really. From, you know, because everything is kind of ugly right from the get-go, and then, you know, it's polishing.
Going back to the earlier, you know, thing we were talking about aesthetic and how much aesthetic matters, and it's like you're writing music to some scene, and suddenly there's a, you know, black card that says like insert VFX of car on fire or something, and you're like, shit, you know.
Okay, then in your head you make up what it looks like, but then when you see it, it's completely different.
Well, I feel the same way too about scripts. It's like I'll work on something and they say, let me send you the scripts, and I'm like, no, I can't do that, because if it's like if I read a book and then it gets turned into a movie and you go see it, you're like, well, this isn't what that's not what Harry Potter looks like. You know, it's like that kind of shit. Like you can't. It's a big leap for somebody who is a creative-minded, you know, person, you know, to suddenly have to, you know, see it a second way or something. It's like very difficult. Yeah. like I was sent a script a couple weeks back that I still am not sure if I'm going to read, because I'm just like, I'm going to read this and then I'm going to visually come up with my own, the way it looks in my head. And then when I go to work on it, like you're right, it's going to be completely different, and I'm going to have to completely readjust, you know, to like, oh, so this is, you know, it is difficult. It's a weird animal. It's definitely a weird animal. And then also like just the process of post-production and the pacing. And it's funny because like working in music, I think everybody tends to look at you, the musician, and go, okay, well, you do what you do. You know, it's like because I mean, more or less that's fair. You know, they're going to go, okay, well, we're going to hire you and pay you, and you're going to do what you do, you know. But they always kind of like misunderstand how you're being thrown into the fire, you know, as far as the whole post atmosphere is concerned, and how people work, and the process that it takes to get to like a finished product, and the chaos, because post-production in film and TV is like abject chaos all the time. It's just madness. I always joke, like, it's amazing to me that any film gets made, because there's so many moving parts involved, and the thing can be wildly different from start to finish, from like, okay, I got an idea, let's write a script, to like, here's the finished thing. I mean, you hear all the horror stories, and it's like,
it's
It's a challenge.
It's really
Definitely.
interesting. So, like, Matt, your entry into scoring is a little bit different than Seth's, where Seth, you were very much established as the Com Truise thing,
Yep.
and started scoring. And Matt, you kind of making a Vanity set and you as scoring kind of came together a little bit, developed together, right?